Hey, I'm sorry for being a little bit late. Usually we're able to get these updates right away as we have breaking news, but I'm just got back from Alaska, just got back from the airport, walked in to breaking news of Julio Jones heading to Tampa, where I lived for the past 12 months. Love me some Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this obviously is going to have an impact for Chris Godwin, Russell Gage, even Tom Brady. I think this will have an impact for. So I'm going to be excited to talk about every single one of these players, where they should be now going in fantasy football drafts. But you know what I have to ask from you. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football, and let's dive right in. And the first thing that I want to look at is the current ADP for all players involved. I want to look at where these guys are actually being drafted on Underdog Fantasy. Let me pull this from my other monitor real quick. And on Underdog Fantasy, as I try to find where I can get this, you will see these wide receivers are going very high in drafts. And the reason for this is obviously you're attached to Tom Brady. You are attached to the best quarterback of all time. You're attached to someone who led the NFL in passing last season. So if you're projecting out volume, if you're projecting out efficiency, hell, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be well above average in not only their pass to run ratio, but with their pass to run ratio, their pace of play, it's going to be efficient, not the Big Ben Pittsburgh Steelers from last year. This is going to be with Tom Brady. And if we're heading over there to look at that ADP, you currently have Mike Evans going as an early second round pick. I've seen Mike Evans sliding into the end of the first. Now, I don't want to say that this impacts Mike Evans too much, because we know regardless, if Julio Jones is on the field, you're going to have Mike Evans out there as well. Mike Evans is going to be the alpha wide receiver one until Godwin comes back. We'll get to that in just 1 second. But with Julio, he should honestly, if anything, complement Mike Evans, where through the first month of the season, assuming that Chris Godwin may miss some time, you are then not going to have defenses double teaming Evans. And while, yes, a lot of times that argument is not good. Like if you hear someone telling you, oh, A.J. Brown coming over to Philadelphia is going to help Devonta Smith, it's going to take defensive attention away, you should ignore that argument, because we know A.J. Brown could be a target hog. We know that A.J. Brown will be able to go there and dominate for 25% of his team's target share. And it doesn't matter if the efficiency of a Devonta Smith, it doesn't matter if the efficiency of, say, Jalen Waddle in Miami goes up. If you have the addition of one of those target volume monsters, then all of a sudden that player is going to get hurt based off of volume and volume alone. Well, with Julio Jones, it's not like Julio Jones is going to come in and command a ridiculous amount of volume in Tampa, but he should be able to take defensive attention. Right now, Mike Evans on Underdog Fantasy, where we will get a draft going on Underdog later tonight. Make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy for the best place to have 2022 fantasy football drafts. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. You'll be able to get our 2022 rankings. You'll be able to get our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. You'll be able to draft with us, all with just a $10 deposit on Underdog. Make sure you take advantage of that. But right now, he is going at pick 15.9, and that's directly ahead of Aaron Jones, Saquon Barkley, Deebo Samuel, Mark Andrews, and directly behind DeAndre Swift, CeeDee Lamb, Joe Mixon, Travis Kelce. If I was going to be looking to move Mike Evans down, I don't know how much further he could go, because Godwin may miss the beginning portion of this season. And while Godwin's not in this offense, Mike Evans does have it in his range of outcomes. He's led the NFL in touchdown rate over the past 2 seasons to be the #1 wide receiver in fantasy football for this upcoming season until Godwin comes back. Let me please put an emphasis on that. So I think if you're playing in a casual fantasy football league where there are going to be a lot of trades happening throughout the year, where your league mates are very active, they're going to be sending out some trade offers, you still kind of want to draft Mike Evans at the beginning of the second round, understanding, hell, this is a player we can look to sell high 3 weeks in if Godwin starts slow or if Godwin misses time. However, of course, if you're playing in best ball, if you're playing in a high stakes redraft league where you're not going to be able to make trades throughout the season, or if you're playing with some inactive managers, then all of a sudden Mike Evans does become a lot less appealing, because he goes from being, say, a target hog that could potentially get 30% of his team's target share with the departure of Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, to all of a sudden someone that that's not in the range of outcomes. He's not going to be able to get up to 27, 28% of his team's targets when you have Godwin and Julio Jones there down the stretch. So with Evans, you have to knock him a bit. I would definitely be drafting him behind, say, someone like Aaron Jones at this point, but it's not like he can fall too much. Now, of course, the one player that needs to plummet, and I repeat, plummet down rankings right now, is going to be Russell Gage. Because with Russell Gage, this has been someone that's been one of the largest risers in fantasy drafts over the past 2 months, where if we now look at his ADP, it's got out of control. Russell Gage is going directly before Joe Burrow, Devonta Smith, Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Hopkins, Drake London, Miles Sanders, Russell Wilson, Trey Lance. Russell Gage is going before all those players. And the thesis with it is, oh, what if Godwin misses the beginning portion of this season? Then all of a sudden, Russell Gage, as a wide receiver, got $30 million to go to Tampa to play with Tom Brady on a team that doesn't have the weapons now that Gronk is gone, now that Antonio Brown is gone, where Godwin just got cleared to practice. It looks like everybody coming out here and telling you that you were an idiot for drafting Chris Godwin at the beginning of the 6th round. Yes, there are people telling you that. They are probably wrong, because it doesn't look like Chris Godwin's going to start the year on the PUP and miss the first 4 weeks of the season. Still probably miss a couple. As I've always said, I think Godwin potentially misses 2 to 3 games, starts a little bit slower, but people got really excited for Russell Gage for that reason. But now with Russell Gage, it's not like it's going to be a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 type situation, and there's nothing beyond that, where the targets are so condensed between those 2 top guys in Tampa that Gage has to be effective because the offense he's playing in. No, now they have somewhere else to go. Now, I still project Russell Gage in games where Godwin may miss at the beginning portion of the season to be the wide receiver 2 in Tampa. I still think Gage will have that hot start, but they have a viable wide receiver 3 now. They have someone else that can just siphon away some targets from those top 2 options. So I think you have to be a lot less excited about Russell Gage, especially with the news that Chris Godwin has been cleared to practice. So if we're talking about where Russell Gage needs to fall in these drafts, I can't take him over Burrow. I can't take him over Smith. I can't take him over Gibson. I haven't been taking him over these players anyway. I mean, I prefer Michael Thomas over him. I prefer Christian Kirk. I prefer Renfro, probably. I prefer Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You have to see Russell Gage fall minimum for me to be interested in taking him, 15 picks. Like, please, I'm going to pull up the live chat in just 1 second. At this point, with Godwin being cleared to practice, with Julio Jones signing with the Bucs, are you going to prefer TJ Hawkinson, Brandon Ayuk, or Russell Gage? Let me know who you prefer out of those players. So I'll tell you right now, TJ Hawkinson has an ADP of 88, and Russell Gage has an ADP of 69. A 20-pick gap. I think Gage's price needs to come down dramatically. And now, of course, with Mr. Julio Jones, we need to address the talent that he still has, because I'll be the first person to admit Julio Jones is not the wide receiver he once was. I mean, I think that people have come to disrespect Julio Jones this offseason. The number one thing that has annoyed me this offseason are people down there in the comment section going, oh, Mason, you clown. Michael Pittman Jr. is an easy wide receiver 1. Look at all the wide receiver 1 seasons that Matt Ryan has produced throughout his NFL career. Have you not heard of this guy named Julio Jones? Julio Jones is one of the best wide receivers of all time. And what I want to do real quick is go back to the last full season that we had from Julio Jones. Now, I understand this is not going to be something that a lot of people remember, because obviously last year was a lost year with Julio. And on top of it, if we go back to 2020, Julio Jones wasn't necessarily fantastic from a points per game basis. But we have to remember, there were multiple games where Julio Jones, he didn't play the entire game. We go back to week 11 against the New Orleans Saints. Here, Julio Jones plays 36% of snaps. So when he plays 36% of snaps, yeah, you better believe he's only scoring 5 fantasy points. What do you expect from the man? We go to week 4. He only plays 21% of the snaps. Yeah, he's only scoring 7 fantasy points. He played 20% of the snaps. What are you expecting? But in games where Julio Jones did not leave early, and in games where Julio Jones played 80% or more of snaps, here was his fantasy points per game in 2020, the last year we had from a healthy Julio Jones. Now, we'll get to the risk in 1 second, please. 24 points, 33 points, 17 points, 20 points, 16 points, 15 points. Now, I'm not going to pull out the calculator, but if I were to make a guess, about 19 fantasy points per game. Julio Jones was a top 10 wide receiver while healthy the last time we saw him in 2020. Now, of course, let's address the red flags here because there's a reason that Julio Jones was a free agent for this long. Now, I'm sure he had other offers that he turned down. It's not like the Bucs, probably the first team to decide to sign Julio Jones, but there are red flags. This is a player that throughout his entire NFL career, he has dealt with injuries. This is a player, if we go to what we saw in 2020, you had a total of 0 games. 2021, 0 games with 80% or more of snaps for Julio Jones. If we're looking at 70% of the snaps or more, you had 3 games from Julio Jones. And he's 33 years old at this point. So please do not draft Julio Jones thinking, oh, locked and loaded, top 24 wide receiver. Beautiful. No, of course you can't say that. I'm still expecting that Russell Gage plays over Julio Jones. But the impact that he will make for the other options in the receiving game, specifically Russell Gage, is going to be large. And I think the questions that I had centering around Tom Brady now maybe are going to dwindle away ever so slightly because y'all know I came out with my quarterback rankings, I believe 2 or 3 days ago at this point. And I had Tom Brady around quarterback 9, quarterback 10. Can't remember off the top of my head. And what I can remember off the top of my head is he was quarterback 3 last year on a points per game basis. He led the NFL in passing yards. And the reason I was expecting a step back, I don't want to bring up the age because, of course, you can never bring up age with Tom Brady. What was concerning was the departure of the number 1 player on this team in yards per route run last year in Antonio Brown. The number 2 player on this team in yards per route run in Rob Gronkowski. And if you looked at the splits of Tom Brady over the past 2 years in games where Antonio Brown has played versus hasn't, he's a lot better with Antonio Brown. Same thing with games that Rob Gronkowski has played with where he hasn't. So I do have my own concerns about Brady. I was very concerned that he may start the year that he only has Mike Evans, and that's absolutely it. Mike Evans, Cameron Brate, and Russell Gage to throw the ball to. That was concerning for a quarterback who can't run. But now that Godwin's been cleared to practice, still think Godwin probably misses the first few weeks of the season, if I'm going to be honest. And you add in Julio Jones to bolster this room with some depth. It's a lot more exciting. I think you can move Tom Brady up ever so slightly. But let me run to the room real quick and let's get your thoughts on this. Coco says Julio was a complete bust last season. My man, I don't know if you know this about fantasy football, but just because it happened last year doesn't mean it's going to happen this year. Okay. Just because Christian McCaffrey was a bust last year, just because Saquon Barkley were a bust last year, can't just completely scratch them off your board. Now, let me try to figure out where I would draft Julio Jones because Julio is someone that we've been drafting a considerable amount of the very last round on Underdog Fantasy. Like you've been getting some crazy value on Julio Jones. You get him in the last round, second to last round. Sometimes I even reach for him in the 15th. But if we're looking at Julio Jones' current ADP, right now he's going behind KJ Hamler. He's ahead of KJ Hamler now. Curtis Samuel, he's ahead of Curtis Samuel now. Kendrick Bourne, he's ahead of Kendrick Bourne. Paris Campbell, he's ahead of Paris Campbell. He's ahead of George Pickens. He's ahead of Sammy Watkins. He's ahead of Alec Pierce. Let me know in the chat, who do you prefer out of this group? Obviously, Nico Collins going to see the expanded role now. But Robbie Anderson, DJ Chark, Corey Davis, Julio Jones. I think that's probably about the line where he goes to that Robbie Anderson tier of guys. Robbie Anderson currently has an ADP of 149 compared to Julio Jones with an ADP of 191. So I'm expecting Julio to jump, 50 picks? So congrats if you were drafting Julio Jones. Of course, he's not a top 24 wide receiver. Of course, he's going to miss time. But you're not drafting him in round 1. This isn't 2015. You're not drafting him in round 2. You're not drafting him in round 3. If everybody was saying Julio Jones was going to be the wide receiver he once was, you wouldn't be taking him at pick 180 right now. He would probably be going, pick 15? So, I understand he's not the player he once was, but let's get it up on the counter. We need a little counter for how many times I say this in a video, but that is baked into his draft price. You're not the only person who knows that. Okay. So I think we should probably cut the live stream here. I would want to go ahead and potentially get a draft going, but we're going to get a draft going tonight. So please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Super excited to get these live streams going back up. Super excited to get a live fantasy football draft and see where these Bucs players go tonight. But thank you again. I appreciate all of y'all, and I hope you have a great day.